Hi, welcome back to another episode of Analyze Scripts. Today we are so excited. Number one, because we have these sweet new professional microphones. So you might notice our sound sounds stellar.
Totally.
We're also excited because we're going to be talking about the hit show Beef, which was on Netflix this past year. Stars Ali Wong, who I love. Portia, did you ever watch any of her stand-up specials when she was pregnant?
Yep.
Oh, those were coming out like right when I was pregnant or postpartum. So they just really resonated with me.
She's hysterical.
I loved it. She is so funny and she always wears the coolest glasses. And she's also just like Polly Pocket. Like she's so cute. I want to put her in my pocket. I just love her.
Yeah, her style is amazing.
Sick. I was astounded though by her acting. Like who knew that she was such a good actress, right? Like
no, I didn't even know that was the same person. Like
that she was like
talking
capable
about
of
it.
that.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, okay. Yeah.
Right. Like I thought this role was going to be her like with road rage and being angry the whole time, but it was so much more complex and deep and sensitive. It was really wonderful. So
yeah.
Again, if you've been living under a rock, this show won 8 Emmys, including one for Ali Wong. And then they won a bunch of other nominations or, won a bunch of other awards. Well deserved, I think.
Totally.
I thought it was also like artfully really beautiful. And I liked all the titles of each episode. I feel like they probably have like a really deep meaning that went over my head.
It went over my head too. And then the art in each one, I was just like, wow, I feel like so cultured right now.
Yeah,
watching
it. I loved it. My husband pointed out, which I just want to mention, that, he thought it was really funny and ironic and, interesting that the only characters who died, I think, in this show were the white characters. When in so many, films and TV shows that are predominantly white, it's the person of, a minority background who dies. And I just felt like, that was interesting.
Yeah.
Good,
Yep.
It's time to level up, the score, I guess.
The director, producer, writer, Lee Sung Jin just signed like a major Netflix deal to do more.
Oh, good.
So I think he's like super talented and it was a very impressively complicated show.
It was.
I don't know
good.
how else to just describe it.
Yeah, and it was also distributed by A24, who did Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I think they've done a couple other things that are escaping my mind right now.
They're big.
They're big, yeah. But they were also like indie, but they're getting big,
Yep.
So I think that's cool. Like maybe like us someday, So again, just to round out the cast, we have Ali Wong playing Amy, Joseph Lee playing her husband George, Stephen Yeun playing Danny. I found myself very attracted to him during the show.
Danny?
Maybe not the character Danny, but Stephen.
Yeah.
I was like, he's attractive. Then young Mazzino playing Paul, Ashley Park playing Naomi, David Cho playing Isaac, and then a whole host of other really wonderful actors and actresses. So, we think it's great that we're covering this show today because we're both showing up like a little hot, a little angry. I think especially me. I'm feeling like I've had a morning. Okay?
Yeah. Yep.
Had a morning.
We're a little overwhelmed, a little overstimulated. Carrying a lot and, putting out great content while sometimes not always doing well. And that's just, that's just like Amy. That's life.
Yeah, I feel like I really connect with Amy. I really connect with her being overstimulated, underappreciated, maybe undersupported. I feel like that sometimes, not all the time. I will say, not all the time. I'm okay. But every now and then, I'm having one of those mornings today when like no one can get their shoes on, no one can find their winter coats. We're all running late, and everyone just looks at you to solve all the problems.
Yeah,
and I just want to tell everyone like, put your own shoes on.
And I think they're to be a little gender biased. I think that a lot of people, I would say like a lot of women, can resonate with that of just kind of managing now in this 21st century like multiple roles. So we're not just home anymore managing the household. It's like now we're working and managing the household, and many men are doing a great job at balancing it too, and also taking things on the household off the plate. But it's a little, it can get a little dicey.
And I will say, however, it just seems like, the mental load that moms carry.
Yes.
Or maybe women, I'm just going to say moms, because that's what I resonate with, just seems to be more.
Yeah.
And it just seems like men don't have the same like tasks or responsibilities like enter their mind,
Mm.
Like they might not think like, oh, Valentine's Day is coming up. Like we need to get the Valentines and then we need the little bags for the Valentines. And then like, oh, maybe so and so wants a little Valentine's shirt. They're just like, oh, it's Valentine's Day. It's
Like the
just like,
day of, oh wait, that's weird.
yeah.
I can't get any reservations anywhere.
Oh, exactly. Or just things like that. And again, not all men, not again, we don't want to be too stereotypical, but I think it's a real thing a lot of women face. At least I see it a
Mhm.
lot in my practice. I feel it personally from time to time.
Mhm.
I'm feeling it today. I think it's, like a true thing. And so to figure out like, how do you communicate with your partner or your colleagues or whoever it is that you might be
Right.
noticing this tension with in a healthy way is, just so poignant for what we're going to discuss
Mhm.
today in this show where we see a lot of unhealthy behaviors,
Yes.
aggressive, hostile behaviors to manage
Rage.
feelings of anger and
Mhm.
rage. So it's just really funny and timely.
Yeah. Yep. Here we are,
Um, here we
recording
are.
about intense emotions while sometimes
Yeah,
feeling intense emotions.
I know, right? It also reminded me that have you ever been in a situation with road rage before?
Yes.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable sharing?
Um, sure. I would say that I feel like I can have road rage. Like it's me.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Um,
You're the problem, it's
I'm the
you.
problem, it's me.
Okay.
Sometimes I feel like when you're kind of on your last straw and then
Yep.
someone cuts you off or
Yeah.
someone beeps at you when you didn't do anything wrong,
Oh,
I
yes.
feel like there
Unjustified.
is this deep, dark place that I can go into, and I will not follow someone, but like I will wave my hands and yell in my car. Hopefully, they're not seeing me. I'm not like putting my hand out the window
Yeah.
because I don't want to then get like assaulted because that
Yeah.
that can
That's scary.
escalate, which we've kind of
We
saw.
see in the show.
So I don't know what it is like, and I feel like I'm either on one end of the spectrum or the other, which is a little extreme,
Mm.
but I'm either like
We all have
so
our extreme
chill
moments.
and, "Oh, it's
Yeah.
fine," and I will laugh to myself like, "Oh, like, maybe they have to go to the bathroom," like, they're in a rush, and then
Mm.
the other time I'm like,
Ah, yeah.
like, so I don't know. I feel road rage at times.
I
The
think
key
we
is to
all
not
do at
act on
times.
it. Mhm.
Right. And I also think like living in Connecticut, we see a lot of like New York drivers. Again, not to like be too stereotypical, but like it's true. They drive really nutty and like really fast and cut you off even in the slow lane. It's like scary.
Mhm.
No, I think everyone feels like that from time to time. It's just also like if you are just like in your car alone, someone cuts you off and you're like, you like yell or do a hand
Yes.
gesture, but you're not hurting anyone. That can be a way of like release, I think, right?
Yes.
Like if you've had a really hard day or you had a fight with someone, that might just be a
Mhm.
way of like releasing it again in a
Yep.
way that doesn't hurt anyone. What we see in this show is that things hurt each other and then they escalate.
Mhm.
And I actually in high school was like the victim of road rage where I was driving to my boyfriend's house
She was
and I
in
picked
Florida, so it's not me. I'd like to clarify that.
yeah,
Anyway,
exactly. We didn't
continue.
we didn't know each other yet. But I was like, I'm gonna pick him up some McDonald's because I'm like such a nice boyfriend or girlfriend. So I pick up McDonald's and then so in Florida, you don't have to take driver's ed. You just have to pass the test, okay? And like I passed the test. My mom, I think, like took me to a couple parking lots and we like practiced a couple things, but I was like not a good
Mm.
driver. It's not like I have like hours under my belt, had a teacher, I just was like winging it. So I will say, like, still there's some things like parallel parking. I feel like I just never really learned how to do this, you
Yeah.
know? And it's just funny. I think in Florida, like anyone can drive, whatever. But anyway, so apparently, like I'm pulling out of the McDonald's, and then at the next stop, like this guy on a motorcycle, like a full on adult man, like I'm 17 in a Mercury Mountaineer, okay, and like this full on adult man in like motorcycle gear, like comes up to the driver's window, banging on it, screaming at me, swearing at me that I cut him off. And I was like, and in my head, I'm like, oh my God, maybe I did because I'm not a good driver. But still, like, I don't know if it warrants like that. Like I don't think it was a situation where I almost like hit him or anything like that. Like I'm not that bad of a driver. Maybe I just like pulled out a little too quick or something. I don't know. But he starts banging in the tail light on the car. He breaks it. He's like banging all over the car and he starts threatening, I'm gonna kill your effing family. I have your license plate. He like
What?
yeah, no, it was really scary.
It
It
wasn't
was
just like a knee
really
jerk, you know, like
scary.
tap the car, what, stay, and then running away. That's like
No, and it wasn't
continuing,
like
right?
right, it's like this show. It wasn't like a
Yeah.
give me the middle finger, run away, and also this is, like, literally a 40-year-old man, and a
Mhm.
full-on adult man. He's clearly I'm a teenager, right? Like, clearly I'm a young girl, and he keeps going, and he, like, followed me for a little bit. I was so freaked out. I, like, dropped off the McDonald's at my stupid boyfriend's apartment,
Now you're
and
pissed.
then
Tried to do a
yeah,
nice thing.
I know, and ooh, stupid boyfriend, but anyway, so it was scary. It was really, really scary, and I don't think I ever told my mom, like, that's what happened.
Mhm.
So now she knows. Sorry, mom.
Yeah.
But it's, like, really, really scary. So, I mean, I guess I thought this show was just gonna be about, like, escalating road rage, and even, like, in the first episode, we see the road rage, like, escalating, and, like, was it kind of funny at times? Yeah, I thought so, but then it, like, keeps going, right?
I was like, I had to watch maybe 2 to 3 episodes at a time because I would get so anxious. And like I think that's just how good at acting they are. Like that's
Mhm,
why they
mhm,
won because I like could feel their emotions. I was like, this is so intense.
mhm.
Like maybe today, like I don't have the space for this. Like I'm maybe out of,
Mm,
I use like a 1 through 10. Like I'm already at a 7 out of 10 today. So like I can't tolerate
mm,
anything else. And I was thinking,
mhm,
Amy
mhm.
and Danny were probably at like 20 out of 10s. And then
Yeah,
this
they were
happened
off the
and they have
chart.
no space to like tolerate
Yes. Yes.
anything.
Yes. So that's a great segue portion into something we wanted to talk about, which is like, what is anger?
Mhm.
Right? Like, and how is that different from aggression and hostility? And how do we like treat this when we see it? Right.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know about you, but I was always taught that we call anger a secondary emotion,
Mhm.
that typically comes after someone's experiencing a primary emotion like sadness, hurt, fear, loss, that makes them feel so vulnerable and helpless and out of control that in order to like deal with those feelings, they actually go to anger.
Yep.
Because and it's subconscious. It's not something you're
Yeah.
consciously doing. It happens so fast,
Mhm.
but you just shift to anger because for some reason that's like more comfortable for
It
most people to
masks,
feel.
I feel like deeper pain, like shame,
Yes. Mhm.
embarrassment or other things that we just like don't want to feel as much as like anger is
Mhm.
more comfortable. I think it's more known. We're angry in like
Mhm.
childhood, right? Babies like they get
Yeah.
angry, but like they don't know
Right.
what shame is and they don't
It's
know how
more
to communicate
primitive.
that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This show also reminded me a lot of Inside Out, right? With like
Mhm.
the different little emotions. And I think we saw that there too, like really masterfully done. We have an episode about that if you want to like scroll back and listen. But so like that's how we think about anger. And part of what we do, I believe, in therapy and like especially classes and stuff like anger management, even DBT, like dialectical behavioral therapy, is figuring out like how do you identify when you're feeling anger? How do you sort of rate it for yourself, like you were saying, with like an anger meter or a number scale? And how do you figure out like what are your triggers? And then what is your plan of action for coping with that feeling? To allow yourself to kind of wait for it to simmer, wait for it to come down from a 10 to a 7, from a 7 to a 4 before you
Yep.
react in a way that you're going to regret, right?
Mhm.
Um and so again, I think of rage as like like blinding, like even
Yeah.
like the most intense anger, like I think that's what Danny and Amy were feeling at the start of this. It's like when you're out of control.
Mhm. There's no
Um
logic anymore. Like you are
there's
just
no
kind of,
logic.
acting as so fast. And sometimes
Mhm.
like there's a small place for it, but I'd say like this is kind of a scary example, but like if someone's like breaking into your home or like it's like we need to be quick. We need to just be firing
Yes.
and like acting and like but when someone cuts you off, like we don't need to do that then and it can put us in really dangerous places that are like
Yeah.
kind of unnecessary versus like a necessary you need to act, you
Yeah.
need to feel really intense things.
Right. Yeah. Even when someone cuts you off, like maybe you need to, maybe that like your amygdala needs to fire your fear response and the anger
Mhm.
needs to come up to like keep you safe. So you break quickly. But then like it should simmer down. Like it can come down without you like
Right.
going further, like tailing them or flipping them off or screaming or punching in their tail
Mhm.
like happened to me as a kid. So it's just really interesting. As you were saying that, it reminded me also of like the trauma response. Like it's kind of sounds similar where like you might have a quick um reactive feeling, right? Like
Yep.
fear, or something like that. And anger is like a way of almost like avoiding it,
Mhm.
keeping you out of it. Because again, you feel so vulnerable and out of control and helpless. It's like a more active emotion that you feel like you can do something about.
Yep.
And again, we do see that in a lot of people who have PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder. There's a lot of anger, a lot of
Mhm.
acting out, fighting, like things like that. It happens so quickly. And that, I mean, I can understand that, that like, it's a way of almost like protecting yourself in an
Yeah.
aggressive way, right? So
Yep.
this is real tricky and really complicated, right? And like I was wondering if you could speak a little bit, Portia, about like I guess what did you learn about anger management and like how do you sort of like help people deal with that? I know you see a lot of teenagers who,
Yeah.
tend to be angry at
Mhm.
times.
So when thinking about, how teens experience anger, I would say that first of all, like we know that their brains aren't fully developed, especially in the front where we see a lot of
Mhm.
planning and thinking through actions, which is why teens as a whole are more impulsive, have
Mhm.
poorer emotion regulation skills, can't really like negotiate yet, can't think things
Mhm.
through. And typically like we get better at that just naturally
And
through
also it
experience
takes
and through
yeah.
brain development.
And it takes until like your mid-20s to
Mhm.
30s. So just like
Exactly.
FYI, and like I need to remind myself of that in the mornings when my small children can't find their shoes. So
Yeah.
thank you for the reminder.
No, totally. And even seeing like it in relationships. So thinking back to high school and college, I'll just speak, to what I kind of saw. Hopefully this is not crazy. But like a lot of interpersonal issues with a lot of intense emotions, like people fighting, of
Mhm.
course, substances involved, like alcohol does not
Mm.
make things
Mhm.
better. But
No.
just like
Turns
really
out.
poor communication. So anyway, with teens, it's really just kind of about like if they're escalating to a point where things are getting a little unsafe, like they're punching a wall, or like I'm running away, it's like, okay, like we need to walk back these big behaviors to do something
Mhm.
that's like a little bit more safe. So like punch your pillow, like, and then
Mhm.
and then once you can kind of try to do that, and like maybe you're beating your fists into your bed, it's like getting that
Mhm.
intense energy
Mhm.
out. Maybe then instead of doing that, we can kind of then go outside if it's really cold, or do like 100 push-ups as fast as you can,
Mhm.
or all of these things I'm kind of referencing are like the tip skill, TIPP, by it's from DBT. So T is
Mhm.
temperature, so like cold we obviously don't recommend burning people, but we want an intense
Hmm.
temperature with like ice cubes, so squeezing them, putting a cold pack on your
Yeah.
chest or your neck. And then the I is intensive exercise, so doing like running in place, doing jumping jacks, push-ups, something. And then the two
Mhm.
P's are like, I'd say if you're a little bit lower in the anger scale, they're progressive breathing. So just kind of
Mhm.
taking deep, slow breaths, and then
I
progressive
love
muscle
that.
relaxation. So
I love all those things.
we really try to start at the top and match where you are. Like if you are at a
Yeah.
10, you're like trying to talk like this is
It's
not
not
going to
gonna work.
work. We need
Right.
to
You
match
gotta
that intense energy. So
yeah.
like
Right.
Amy and Danny, in a perfect world, they could have in that moment like had a bat to take and like beat, something soft, like, and get all that
Yeah.
energy out instead of chasing each
Yeah.
other and something like
Or
that.
grab
But
some ice cubes and maybe put them on your neck, like by your vagus nerve, which
exactly.
activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the
Mm-hmm.
calming part of your nervous system.
Yes.
We do
So
that
what do you
even with
think they
like
were in? What system were
sympathetic
they?
rage.
Yeah.
They were in sympathetic
Right.
overload, right? So your sympathetic nervous system, that's like your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn reaction, which most people refer to as fight or flight. Here we're seeing them fight. Okay.
Yeah.
That's when adrenaline, norepinephrine, epinephrine, that is just flooding you. Your heart rate's up, your blood pressure's up. You might feel a little shaky.
Mm-hmm.
Your digestion slows down because you don't need to do that right now. You just need to focus on like fighting, running, like that is
Yep.
just active. That is definitely active when you're feeling anger and rage. And again, like the similarities to trauma responses is right there, right? That's the
Mm-hmm.
same system that's getting activated so quickly when someone is feeling re-triggered by a trauma response.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And noting too that like we all can get there. And I would
Yes.
assume that, all of our listeners and you and I can think back to a time where I was just so overwhelmed with emotions. Like I'm thinking more in
Yeah.
teenhood or my early 20s with just something that I'm like, wow, I can't believe I did that. Like I can't believe,
Mm-hmm.
this is not great. Poor emotion regulation. Teens, if anyone's listening, do not do this to my clients. But I remember getting into it with my now husband and being so upset. And I had all these bracelets on at the time. Everyone had Alex and Ani bracelets, or these like
Oh
metal
yeah.
things. I remember like hitting my wrist into this like table outside. I was so mad, and then it
Yeah.
bent. And I was like, oh my gosh,
Wow.
but like now at this point, think I'm more regulated because, my brain's a little bit more developed, but also like I do have more skills to
Yeah.
assist with
Right.
those big feelings. But I think
People
we
have to
can all
learn
probably
those
think of
skills.
that. Yes, you
Yeah, but
have
and
to.
you have to learn those skills,
Hmm.
right? Like again, I always bring it back to like toddlers, maybe because I'm like raising them. But like you don't just like intuitively know this
No.
stuff, right? That's why like kids hit when they're angry. They
Hmm.
push, they yell, they call each other names, right? And then like hopefully you have some good attachment figures, some teachers, some parents, some
Right.
grandparents, some other adults in your life who can start helping you name those feelings and showing you alternative ways of handling them, right?
Hmm.
Like, I see this a lot in my personal life and, with my patients who are raising young kids and even like in schools now, I think it's so great that like schools
Yeah.
are teaching social emotional intelligence and teaching coping skills and deep breathing. My son came home the other day, Portia. They made worry bags that they've got like a brown paper lunch bag and made it look like a monster. And they called it your worry monster. And you can write your worry down and put it in the bag.
That's adorable and so like appropriate for their
Amazing. Oh my
age.
God.
Yeah, I love
I was
that.
like, I need a worry bag.
Mhm.
Like, I
It'll
need to
be
carry
really
that around
full.
with me. It'll be really full. But like I never learned that, right? Like so I just think like also our culture is it's just like bravo everyone for doing a better
Mhm.
job at learning to identify this stuff, normalizing it. Like that just
Right.
the fact that they're telling all the kids like this is normal to have worries and this is one way you can handle it. Like how beautiful,
Right, and
right?
not
It's just
to
so beautiful.
repress it, which I feel like we
Right.
kind of saw with Amy. Like there was a
Kind
lot of
of.
emotional
Kind of.
there's a big
When
in
her
big
husband
ways.
when George is like, "Are you gonna sell this penis-looking vase I made in your store?" And she's like, "Mhm."
Or when she's literally having like a visible mental breakdown and he's like, "Why don't you just like take a minute to journal some positive thoughts tonight?"
Gratitude. Oh my
Which
god. What
again
did you
has a
think?
place, but
Not then. And
not
like,
then.
George was like the epitome of toxic positivity, just
Mhm.
like walking billboard for it,
Yep.
right? And I was like, I just wanted to slap him. Talk about anger. I did. I bet she
Yeah.
does too.
He was like very uncomfortably passive. And I think just in general, like it seemed like in their relationship, which is why I could guess maybe he ended up having an emotional entanglement with someone else, just like a
Oh,
passive role. He's not, he does his art, which we hear from Fumi later on that she doesn't even like it and it's just not good. And he's been like coddled and kind of put
yes.
up on this pedestal and not really had to have like any struggles and or be challenged in any way.
Yeah, and I feel
Um,
like so like also that is such a privileged position to be in,
mhm,
right? To just be like
totally.
lifted up in such a way and just have like so many connections and ride on the
Mhm.
coattails of your father and have a wife who's successful who can like sell your pieces. Like what a privileged position to be in. Like
Right.
no wonder he has time to gratitude
Mhm.
journal,
Yeah.
okay? And just like the audacity of him telling Amy, like you can tell how
Mhm.
angry it made me. I think I
Yes.
really like this show because I feel I like I said I've said in other episodes, like I just feel like I need to learn how to express anger better.
Mm.
Like I have it and I don't express it. And so I'm just always like really impressed when people express it. Maybe not like in such a aggressive,
Yeah.
bad way. But I always want to go to one of those places where you break stuff.
Mhm.
Like one of those like throat like whatever they call it, breaking rooms
Rage
or like go
rooms.
rage or I really want to go to a rage room.
Maybe we
If
could do
anyone
that
is
as a little outing.
yeah, we should. If anyone wants to sponsor the podcast, like that would be awesome.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
always want to though. I just want to like break stuff.
and that's has been a recommendation sometimes of like again, you have to afford to go, you have to have the time to go.
Yeah.
Sure, sure, sure. But
Right.
like it can be a great way to go. Like just know
Mhm.
it's also something that I feel like you do if you really start to know yourself and are working on it. It's like
Yeah.
you know that you have this problem, you know that you have these intense emotions, and you know that this is a pretty decent way of getting them out, releasing some of that
Yeah.
energy.
And I think too, like it doesn't like anger. I think one thing we wanted to mention is an emotion all of us feel,
Mhm.
right? Like just like anxiety is an emotion all of us feel. It's not always pathological. What
Right.
becomes pathological, at least with the anger, are the unhealthy behaviors that might come from it if you don't know how to manage it, if you don't know how to cope with it in a way that doesn't hurt yourself or hurt other people, right?
Right.
So like going to a rage room and throwing stuff and breaking shit,
Right.
like great, that's a great cathartic release.
Mm-hmm.
I could see how maybe someone grieving a really tragic loss might get a release from that. Someone who's lost their job, whatever. Like you could think of a million scenarios where that could feel like catharsis. But doing the same thing in a public location, not healthy,
Right.
right? That would be like criminal behavior,
Right.
like you'd get arrested for it. So again, it's just like learning how do you manage it and when do you manage it and what's a healthy way
Mm-hmm.
or and it not a maladaptive way. That's the word I was looking for.
Right. And I think it's interesting because a lot of the times when people get angry, they cry. And it's like, I think
Yeah.
it's because anger is often, right, like almost
Mm-hmm.
99% of the time, like so much more than just
Yeah.
mad. And that
Yeah.
there are these other emotions. And it's like, that's why, like, I'm so angry and why am I crying? Like, I want to
Yeah.
cry right now. And it's like, because you're feeling like really intense emotions. And, sometimes that just makes you cry. But also, like, there's
Yeah.
probably other emotions that hang out
Right.
more in the like
The
sadness category,
yeah.
worry category. Oh, I just lost my job. Like I'm so angry that they fired me. And then
Yeah.
the worries come in. Well, how am I going to support my
Right.
family? And it's like that piggybacks on the anger.
Right, 100%. And
Mhm.
also like people cry and it for all different reasons. When they're
Mhm.
happy, when they're sad, when
Yep.
they're angry, it's just a behavior. It's not, an emotion itself.
Right.
Um so I feel like I totally interrupted and we got off on a tangent, but going back to that tips method, I
Mm.
love them. That's a great method. And it does remind me of the other DBT skill, the wise mind.
Yeah.
I feel like you have more training in DBT. So do you want to explain that a little bit to our
Sure.
listeners?
So wise mind is helpful if you kind of envision two overlapping circles.
A
Like
Venn diagram,
this.
if you
Yeah.
will.
If you're
Mhm.
looking on YouTube. So like over here on this end is or over end on one end is logic. So that's like we're not emotional. It's really fact based. It's really black and white. And then on the other end is emotions. And then when they meet in the middle, there is that overlap piece, which is our wise mind. So ideally,
Mhm.
we're all acting all the time, with both emotion and logic. So that means like
Oh.
having really, therapy kind of talk conversations like, oh, Katrina, you hurt my feelings when you did this, like, and I'm explaining it really well. And then you're responding in a way with like an awareness and empathy for my emotions and your own experience
Mhm.
while also then like
Mhm.
being able to be a good communicator. And it's just like, sometimes we can do that, and
Mhm.
sometimes we can't.
And that
So
reminds me of Barbie. Remember in Barbie, they
yes,
mentioned, like, I can hold on to logic and reason
yes.
or, like, an emotion
Mm-hmm.
simultaneously. We
And it
loved
makes
that.
me like
Yeah.
a better leader. Yeah,
And it
exactly.
does. Mhm.
So I think we see a lot of the characters throughout the show beef in just their emotion mind. So they're not really
Yes.
thinking through things. They're not thinking of their actions. They're not using logic. They're not saying, like maybe I should turn around and bring, Amy and George's daughter back. Like, cause this is really bad. Like he's just
Yeah.
then acting out of fear. Like, oh shoot, like the cops are
Right.
coming, and
Right.
he's continuing to make bad decision after bad decision. And often that's
Right.
because we're not thinking, quote unquote, the
Right.
easy way of saying it, but we're not using our logical
Our
part.
logic mind. Right. And you're
Mm-hmm.
not like contextualizing how you're feeling. You're not being curious about like
Right.
what are the triggers like but and often like when you're at a 10 out of 10 or a 20 out of 10 like that's inaccessible to you.
You're right. You
Right? So like you
cannot do that
probably need to
there.
use those like tips things first
Mm-hmm.
to bring it down a notch
Right.
to get to the point where you can make use of your logic
Mm-hmm.
mind. Like that part of your brain, which is like your frontal lobes, your executive function, that needs to turn on. So you
Yes.
can like think about things a little bit and move to your wise mind, which again,
Mm-hmm.
what I love about wise mind is it doesn't ignore your emotions,
Right.
right? It doesn't say like, get rid of that. Don't pay attention
Mm-hmm.
to it. It says pay attention to it and let's contextualize it and think
Yes.
more about like what you're feeling and what's a healthier way of
Right.
managing that, whatever the emotion is.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that we sometimes see or that people talk about is if you're holding a fist and you put your thumb in your palm and then you put your fingers down over your thumb, it's like this is when we're regulated. So I'm like, I have a fist and my thumb's under my fingers. And then when we're unregulated, our fingers fly up. We lose all control of our like prefrontal cortex, all of our higher functioning. And we just have that animal brain left. So it's like our amygdala flying.
Yeah.
And we really want to kind of like put the lid back on and come back to
Oh,
like
I like
knowing
that.
who we are, that we have decision making, that we can regulate our emotions, etc. So it's basically saying wise mind, but It's
Yeah.
like, it just, I think again, like they're flying off the handle literally.
I like that though, especially for anger because like you end up making fists. That's a pretty
Yes.
common thing when you're
Yep.
angry. So that's also like a great thing that maybe could like signal to you.
Yes.
Like, oh, I'm feeling angry. And that's part of like anger management and
Mhm.
TBT and other types of therapy, like targeting this feeling, this emotion, the behaviors that come from it is like, how do you recognize when you're feeling it? And how do you cue yourself to start using coping skills rather than
Right.
just react? I love that. I'm going to start using that,
Yeah,
Portia.
it's good. So
Yeah.
so do you want to talk a little bit about Paul, or not Paul? Well, maybe Paul, but like Danny or Amy's childhoods at all? We saw like really little
Yeah.
snippets of them.
We did. And not till like the mid to the end of the show, right? Like
Mhm.
we just sort of saw them have road rage
Right.
like really intensely. And then we see them like both go back to their normal lives and we start to get to know them in the present
Mhm.
day. You know, it seems like Amy is just like an overstimulated mom who's like dying to step back from work, be more present at home, waiting for this deal to go through. Like I really like could feel from her acting just like how nervous she was about it not going through,
Mhm.
right? So she's probably like living at an 8 out of 10 just with like waiting for that deal to come through and feeling kind of strung along by that woman. And then we see Danny, who's like living at the hotel, kind of like struggling, really wanting to make his parents proud, really
Yes.
though struggling to like get on his feet and feeling responsible for his younger brother, who at first we think Paul is just kind of like this failure to launch kid, like not really achieving his potential. I loved all this stuff about like Bitcoin. It just like made me laugh. It then made me sad when they like lost all the money. He had some emotional eating, I thought, like with the Burger King. And
Yes. Yep.
again, that's another type of behavior that's often connected to, you can speak more to that, Portia, like intense emotions that are hard to sit with.
Yeah, and I think they did a good job of showing it in like not a, super extreme like way. I think that tends
Right.
to be more common. It's like we have these big intense emotions, and we, go through a drive-through or go to home and we like eat like a significantly more amount than we typically would. And that,
hmm
I could be a binge, could not be a binge by its specific definition, but like we don't have to binge, clinically definition to overeat, and overeat in a way that's not helpful or useful or
Right.
then going to, make us vomit. Like he threw up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he
Exactly.
clearly overate to the point of feeling really, really physically uncomfortable. And I didn't
Right.
see, like a what would I say? I didn't see any signs of like him forcing himself to throw up. It just kind of came.
Right.
So
Right.
really
Or any
overeating.
like preoccupation with his body image. You know, it
Right.
wasn't like a binge, a purge, and then a restrict. It was more of just like a like emotional eating, binge eating.
Yep.
Um yeah, and I thought it was really interesting that it was the man who they showed that in. Like
Mm.
they didn't show anything about Amy's eating habits. I would imagine she might restrict more if she does anything,
Mm.
or like binge in secret, but we didn't see any of that. But it was interesting. And also, like, again, people overeat for positive emotions sometimes too,
Yep. Yep.
you know? So it's just one of
Excited.
those, yeah,
Mhm.
it's like one of those behaviors, again, that can be connected to your feelings. That isn't always
Right.
pathological. Sometimes it is.
And like
Um,
ultimately we're just not, and this is simplifying like really complicated things, but it's like we do all of these things often just because we're not being mindful. And another part of DBT, right? Like the
mhm.
core starting place is mindfulness. So like you
Right.
can't identify that you're at a 5 if you're not being mindful,
A
let alone a 10.
100%.
You can't identify
Right.
like, this is my fourth burger in 10 minutes. Like, wow, like my stomach is starting to hurt. So I'm going to
Right.
stop. Like that's
Right.
all mindfulness. And we use that in like really almost every single treatment for every single mental health disorder is
Right.
mindfulness, just because we want
Right.
to be aware of what's happening. If we're not, then we can't respond correctly or helpfully.
100%. Right. And that's also goes back to just like staying in touch with your feelings
Mm-hmm.
and where are you at emotionally and what are those feelings signaling to you? Like I see like all of everyone in the world, myself included sometimes, like doesn't want to feel the negative stuff. Right.
Yeah.
But it's usually like sending you a signal, unless it's like something like pathological. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But like when you're feeling anxious, like maybe you're supposed to, because maybe there's like a creepy person following you, like you want to get that signal.
Yes.
But if you learn to suppress and repress that, like it seems like Amy has, and I would, again, like we've said in so many other episodes, a lot of women just learn to do, that's where it gets dangerous and you get
Mhm.
disconnected from your genuine, gut feelings, your intuition. You can like, it's not, doesn't help,
Right.
right?
And you're
And
getting the message from your family that, like, we don't talk about hard things,
feelings.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it seemed like we saw that kind of in both, like, just
Yeah. So what
we're
did
not
you think
addressing
about their
stuff.
upbringings? Because in some ways they were very different, in other ways really similar. And
Mhm.
I also thought the cultural implications of being an Asian household was interesting. I can't like obviously personally speak to that, but in having worked with patients over the years,
Mhm.
I think there are some similarities that they might bring to the table.
Yeah, I feel like generalizing, it seems like they both shared this sense of, I think Amy was an only child?
I think so.
Yeah, and then, Danny was the oldest, so, like, both carrying the load of providing for their parents. Amy had said that she had
Hmm.
paid off her, parents' mortgage when she was back there.
Hmm.
She's not really in contact with them. Danny is trying to support his parents and bring them, nearby with that house that he built and kind of show them how successful he's being. It seems like that was both very important in the families of, just kind of being able to, provide. And then
Hmm.
also, I just think in general, like a repression of like bad, negative, icky emotions. So like we don't talk about
Hmm.
things that
Right.
we shouldn't. We kind of we keep our eyes to the present, not to the past.
Yeah.
And just like all of those kind of messages, I think equally kind of in the same way did not let Danny and Amy be able to express like
Yeah.
their needs sometimes. So then
Yeah.
they just didn't regulate
Right.
emotions well.
Right, and I think, like, what was interesting is I believe, Amy's character, I believe her parents are from China. They immigrated. I just Googled it again really quick to double check. And so I can't remember, and I don't know if they addressed this specifically, if she was, like, born in China, and there is the law about having one child, and then, sometimes if it's a girl that's not as people aren't as happy about that. You're kind of automatically unwanted, I believe. Am I
Mm-hmm.
remembering that correctly?
Yeah.
So sometimes like you just carry that with you from birth. And then we saw a lot of her parents arguing and
Mm-hmm.
her hearing it like from her bedroom, but then no one addressing it. No one being like, "Hey, honey, did you hear us argue?" Or like, "Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Was that scary for you?" Like you just didn't talk
Mm-hmm.
about it. And something that just popped in my mind. So I recently in one of the psychiatry Facebook groups I'm in, they started like I don't know if you're on Facebook still, Portia, but like you can create like these chats now,
Hmm.
these like chat threads. And someone created one that I'm finding so interesting about like the supernatural. Okay. And about like, so it's all these psychiatrists and everyone's just like chiming in about like, yeah, like how does this, factor in with like spirituality, religion, how do you sort of counsel your patients who are delusional or maybe it's not delusional. It's really fascinating and there's a lot of good book recommendations in there, like some written by psychiatrists who have
Hmm.
like participated in exorcisms or other things. I don't know, so not to go for like too woo wooey, but one of them, someone commented about how like sometimes they have dreams about people who have died and they feel comforting or that you feel like this presence, and how they, that sort of makes you think like maybe there is something after this life and things like that. And a person commented saying, they come from an Asian background. And again, I don't, so I don't want to say anything, culturally insensitive or incorrect. But what this poster had said was, in their culture, it's thought that you shouldn't speak directly to the dead because that makes it harder for them to pass on. So,
Okay.
like, once someone dies, you don't like talk to grandma or
Mm.
pray to her, or you sort of say, like, yep, she died, and we all
Okay.
kind of move on. And that kind of fits with like what we were just talking about. So, I wonder if culturally, if that's just sort of the way it is,
Mm-hmm.
sort of more normal, and then what that's like. And again, in our culture, what it was like for Amy growing up.
Yeah.
We see that like scary witch woman, right?
Yes.
Who's like symbolic of something for her, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she like took the sweet treat right to her room, and then like the witch woman says something like, "Oh, I'm watching you," or like someone had told her like, "Don't do things because like the we'll know," or we, don't do
Yeah.
bad things, whatever. And so the what she had then said to Amy was, "Amy, you can't tell your secrets because no one would love you." And
Oh,
that we saw like kind of, at the end of the show, but really play out to being like why Amy has just really struggled to be authentic with others and like share
Yeah.
her true
Yeah.
thoughts and feelings. And then interestingly enough, she goes with George, who again, in the character of him just feels really flat, like there's no
Yeah.
depth. They're just kind of like existing in this like positive,
Yeah.
toxic, fake-ish relationship.
Right. But
Where
he
maybe
says
it
all
is
these like
safe, but
therapy words where you think like maybe he is emotionally intelligent, but then he's not. Right? He's like very superficial and surface level.
yeah.
And like, oh my God, he kept he kept saving Mia's like sexy photos and being like, I just really like the captions.
I
Like it's
know.
such a doofus.
Yeah. Like, no, that's
Oh,
not
like what do
great.
you think? She's an idiot? Like, come on,
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so it's just really interesting, I guess. And then to see what did you make though of that scene where she was like under the sheet with like that old man?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what did you make? That like took me by surprise. Was that
I
supposed to be like an inner impulse she was like fulfilling, but it was like had to be like quite literally hidden, or like what was that about? Is
well,
that how she
going
made
back
money
to
early on?
her, I don't know when that was. Like, was
Right, because
that
she was
before
under the
George?
sheet.
Right, or is
I
that
think
when they were
so.
separate? Like, or was this like when George was
I
living
felt
in the
like that was a
hotel?
flashback.
Okay.
I feel like it was
Okay.
a flashback, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, it was there I think we should know because on TV in the background was like Obama, right? Talking. And I was like, okay,
Hmm.
so is that
Oh.
like is this saying, oh, 2008 and the show is present? Like so it was years and
Mm.
years ago. So maybe I feel like, that was something that's why that you could hear the TV like purposely.
Yeah. Oh, that's smart, Portia. Good call picking that
Oh,
up.
thanks. But then thinking of her, thinking of that and then her use of like a gun at
Yes,
times.
like when she was holding it
Yeah.
really intensely. Like again, you
Mhm.
could like I feel like these are all these like inner impulses that she's had to really repress and
Right.
suppress. Right. And when we use those words, repression means like it's an impulse or an emotion that you push out of your consciousness entirely. Like you're not even aware of it subconsciously versus suppression is you sort of are aware of those feelings or
Mhm.
impulses and you're purposefully trying to get them out of your conscious mind, but you kind of realize it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's important, but
No, I think that's a good
um
clarification. So I don't know, like I think in the sense of with that older gentleman, like there were parts that felt unsafe and parts that felt safe, right?
yeah,
Like meeting a stranger is, of course, we should do it in a public space, like, dating 101.
right.
But then like they did use a condom. So like there were these elements
Yeah,
back and forth of like doing something really risky. But then like there being this also piece that was safe, not showing her face. And then with the gun, it's
yeah,
like, okay, like, is it loaded? And is that part of like the risk that's really
right.
intensely,
The
or is it
draw.
not loaded?
Yeah,
And like that would be
right,
a safer way of like if that's a kink or something. I don't know. It
right.
was
Yeah, exactly.
interesting.
It was really interesting. And I think those are just good examples of like how much she is just like in control on the outside and has learned to do that versus Danny, who like just flies off the handle, it seems like he has a much harder time controlling his emotions and his behavior. Until he kind of like finds the church. What did you think about all of that when he finds the church and he meets Edwin?
Well, Edwin was like ridiculous and
Oh
really
my god.
for in one of my personal experiences, he reminded me of like this youth pastor that I like, you know, like went to church with or whatever like that. It's just I don't know. I could be wrong. Whatever. I'm not gonna talk more about that, I guess. But just like I was just laughing at scenes like that anyway, just based on my own,
I
not
think
to make fun
I
of,
think
but
that's his point though. I think that's the
yes,
point. I think like
yeah,
anyone who's been affiliated with some type of organized religion might come across an Edwin type person who's
yes,
sort of like the poster child or like the golden one, someone everyone
right.
looks up to, who like enjoys that attention,
Like a
you
little
know?
too much, and you're like,
So,
is this for you or for
hmm.
God? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
good question. And then
and
we
we
kind of
saw
see
that
him
later.
fall
Yeah,
apart.
yeah,
Yeah, once he has a baby and like stress is getting to him, and then all of a sudden it's like Danny usurps his role singing. Um, we see him kind of fall apart and he
right.
starts to want to get revenge.
Mm-hmm.
And he sort of is tapping into those instincts himself in a way that I think was unexpected, at least to me when I was
Yeah.
watching it. But then I was like,
Yeah.
no, it's not, because we all have these instincts
Right, right.
and
So
these
at first,
feelings.
I think Danny seemed like it felt, I don't say real or not, but like he was moved when he went to the church. It seems like he had a connection there. Like he knew Edwin's
Hmm.
wife. Like they were, they
I
were
think they
childhood friends
dated
or they
like when they were
dated.
younger.
So there was something there that kind of drew him to it. But like then it felt a little bit more nefarious as time went on. Obviously, with then their plan to like take the money from the church that they were supposed to like do all these
Hmm.
things for. But then like him really like challenging Edwin and like taking the basketball, and then
Hmm.
leading the praise team and all of that. And then it felt like
Hmm.
fake and like more of just Danny like doing these things that are not ultimately helpful for him, constantly getting one over on someone.
Yes. So yeah, exactly. And that's where I was like, does Danny meet criteria for like antisocial personality disorder? Or is he just like reacting in a way to try to get his own needs met? Like, I don't know. I'm really torn. I don't know. What do you, because he's clearly like making conscious decisions, like not sending Paul's acceptance or college
Yeah. That
applications.
felt really bad to me.
Yeah. He is, manipulating people, like agreeing to do the work at the church, planning to steal the money, um, all of that stuff that I don't know. What do you think?
I guess I go back and forth because, and even thinking of like narcissism,
Mm-hmm.
ASPD, and then just like products of your environment, which you can still then
Right.
develop these things. But like he
Right.
was very appropriate and it didn't really feel like a means to an end. Like with, was it Junie? Joni, the
Mm.
daughter?
Junie. Yeah,
Yeah.
Junie.
So like even again, like I think him giving her Skittles was like to get her to like him or to shut up. Like again, a means to an end. But then at the end when
Mm-hmm.
he realized that he had taken her, like I felt like he was very like he wanted her to be okay. And it didn't
Yeah.
just feel like, oh, I don't want to get in trouble for kidnapping. Like when he was trying to like protect her and sing
Right.
and all the stuff in the
Yeah.
car, like that felt more like he has empathy.
Yes, like
Um,
there were moments like that where he had empathy or he had remorse.
mhm.
But I guess my question was like, how much did that pale in comparison to him like getting one over on people? Even like at the
Right.
beginning, like coming and like peeing all over her floor.
Yes.
And like it's just like he has this pattern of like doing that over and over. And it's like he still felt different to me than his cousin Isaac, who it felt like would just break the law and like really not care as much. He just like
Like,
whatever,
he didn't care
right?
about
Like
Junie, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't feel like
right,
she was
like, he was
safe
like,
with
"Let's
him.
use this." Right, he was
Right.
like, "I'm gonna use this even more to my advantage and, like, demand a big ransom and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I don't care if it scares her," whereas, like, with Danny, it did. So, again, I think it's just, like, these characters so masterfully depict, like, the spectrum of these behaviors and
Yeah.
these emotions and, like, how it's not always clear cut about, like, is someone, like, on the sociopath side, or did these are these like more learned behaviors, kind of like we talked about with Dr. Z. Like, did he learn these behaviors because of the environment he grew up in? I'm thinking especially of like, teens or adults we treat who like grew up in neighborhoods with gangs. Like,
Mhm.
it's kind of like you have to pick a side and do those behaviors to survive. Like, we didn't really see like that degree, I don't think, in Danny's background. But it sort of begs that question.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think I really felt icky about the letters, the college applications, because
Yeah.
yeah, yes, of course, I could reflect and understand logically the emotions behind it, like Danny not wanting to be left behind, him feeling like really attached to him, kind of codependent, but like to do
Yeah.
that without it being this crisis, like, and maybe it was a crisis, it was an emotional crisis because Paul was going to leave, he was going to be abandoned, but
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
he wasn't, well, maybe again, I'm contradicting myself. Maybe he did feel like he was in danger, but that felt like so thoughtful. Like he went in there, saw them, took them out. Like after just
Mhm.
talking to Paul, who was like excited to go, talking about like, oh, maybe
Yeah.
you should too. Like,
Yeah.
and then never telling him and just seeing Paul
For, like,
struggle for,
decades.
yes, like
Yeah.
that feels so different than like reacting quickly in the moment and like peeing,
Right.
doing these things. It's like the peeing felt
Right.
calculated and more thought based than just like giving
Right.
someone the finger because they cut you off. you know?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. I mean, it involves like looking up her license plate, figuring out where she lives, pretending to be a contractor, walking around her house for a while, then peeing on her floor. Like all of that felt very calculated to me.
Mhm. It's also a
And then
lot
I
of
guess you,
pee. Did you think that?
it was a
It was
lot
a
of
lot of
pee.
pee. I was like,
Maybe
"What, did
he's
he drink
got
a
like
water
a,
bottle before he went over?" Like
maybe again, even just adding to the
right.
planfulness of it. And so it is just, I don't know, it is interesting. And it's like he kind of kept Paul down or kept him
Mhm.
around for his own gain. I feel like I see this in my patients who have parents who are on the narcissistic side, that they sort of keep them dependent on them in an unhealthy way, a lot of times financially, to keep themselves feeling needed
Yep.
and important. And we kind of saw that, how like, Danny's like, well, I have to take care of you. You're not doing anything. But he's also not like encouraging him
Right.
to become independent, right? So it was just unhealthy.
And it's just in the way that works for Danny. Like he wants Paul to like get a
Mhm.
job so that he can help support their household. It's not so you can go live independently, because that would be letting him go
Right.
to college.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Gosh, Portia. Well, we've already talked about this for about 50 minutes. I feel like we could keep going and going and going. And like, this is why hopefully someday we'll have a Patreon where we could, or
Mhm.
whatever that's called. So we could, dive even deeper into some of the supporting characters. Like Fumi was fascinating. The woman who got like,
Oh my
you know,
gosh.
what I'm thinking in the
Yes,
elevator. I
in
was
the
like,
panic room.
oh my
Yes. So I do want to
God.
talk a tiny bit about Naomi, just because
Okay.
like love Ashley Park. She's wonderful. She's also
Mm.
in the new Mean Girls that we also
Yes.
are we're recording this all in one day. So I was like,
I
"Oh,
know,
that's
because we
so
worked
funny."
so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
we
she's
worked
so
so
great,
hard.
and it was nice to see her in like kind of more of a dramatic role, and I thought, her character was interesting. She just, to put it without like mental health terms, she just seemed like a social climber, kind of like
Mhm.
trying to, be with whoever is the best. I thought her fake, like being fake to Amy, and then like
Mhm.
stabbing her in the back after, like looking things up, getting really jealous that Amy was getting closer to, is it Maria?
But she was also right. Like, that's the thing. Like, yeah, okay, but also, like, she was right. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she was on to Amy. She
Yeah.
figured it out. Like, she wasn't wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like that dynamic also just displayed, like, the tension between, like, working mom versus stay-at-home mom in, like, a really
Yes. Oh, you're
dramatic,
so busy.
extreme way.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and Amy, like, really
Mm-hmm.
put her down, like when she did have all that time to figure her out. And I think
Right.
it's because she figured her out.
Yeah. Yeah, the end, the show, I had no idea what to expect. It took all in these crazy directions, and the scene where Maria literally gets crushed by the panic room door.
Oh my
I
God.
like, my mouth was like on the
Jordan.
floor. I was like,
Yeah.
"What? That's insane!" Like
Ah.
it was like such a good part of the show. Like like
And you
they
just,
didn't need
yeah.
to put that in there, but it was like this
And then all of a sudden,
horrific
like
death.
the door closes and you're just thinking like, oh my God, Naomi's in the elevator with like half her body.
And it just keeps banging on her body. I was like,
Yes.
we didn't
Oh my
need this,
God.
but
So
now
intense.
now it couldn't have not
Now
been
I
in
need it.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so as we wrap up, like, what did you make of the ending? The final episode where they're like lost in the forest. Again, like their road rage gets the best of them. After all of this, it still does. And they like, run each other off the road and then they're stranded and they're like hallucinating. And then what did you make of the end when she crawls into the hospital bed with him?
I would like to think, like, simply that she, like, I don't know if it was like obsession, infatuation, love, feeling seen and heard from them just going on that
Mm,
basic like trip together from the
mm.
poison berries. Feeling really seen. That's what I would take it from. It's like he's the only one who's ever like really understood her at her like bad core self.
Yeah, I would
Um,
say they are trauma bonded,
they have
perhaps.
to
Like,
be.
like to use like a phrase we hear thrown around. I also
Yeah.
wonder if it was just like sending home the message, like, you never know what other people are going through, and
Yeah.
find like it was really like it took that much for them to finally like look at each other in a different light and be more
Mm-hmm.
curious about each other rather than so hateful and
Right.
rageful. And then once they started to get to know each other better, again, while they were like tripping, so they're still not totally present, which I think is important to know, but
Mm-hmm.
like only then were they able to like, was the rage able to soften? And I think
Right.
it just, the intensity for the situation that it like how much it took for them to like finally see each other matched the intensity of their rage.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. I felt like when she crawled into bed, I don't know if it was like romantic or just like hugging him,
Yeah.
feeling more empathy, more compassion,
Mm-hmm.
maybe some regret, like feeling worried about if he was going to be okay or not. Um, and it was interesting that it was George who shot him in the end. Like they were almost finally out, and then all of a sudden, here's George with the gun. They tried to hide, and
Right.
it's George, the one who
Right.
ends up like maybe really hurting him. I feel like I could watch this series like so many more times and get more and more out of it every time. It was just like really beautifully,
Yeah.
masterfully done.
It was. It was a great show. So it's on Netflix if you have listened to this
Yeah.
all the way through and want to watch it and haven't already. But
And it's not
they
that long. Like the
no.
episodes aren't that long. I think there's like 8 or 9, but it's
Yep.
really good. I don't know if there will be a second season. I kind of don't want there to be. I kind of want it to
No.
just leave on that like, you know,
Yep.
leave you contemplating and wondering, and
Yeah.
it's just really interesting. I think we'd love to hear what you, our listeners, think about the show or this episode. So please, leave us a comment or DM us on Instagram at Analyze Scripts Podcast. You can watch this episode on YouTube, Analyze Scripts Podcast. Find us on TikTok. Send us an email, analyzescriptspodcast@gmail.com. Leave us a review. Let us know what you think. Like, we really have a lot of thoughts here.
Yeah, and we love getting recommendations from you guys. So
Mm-hmm.
feel free to subscribe to our channel. We would really appreciate some reviews. I
Yes.
hear that that's like, the most
A good
important
way
thing
to
of a
grow.
podcast. Yeah. So
Yeah, and
if
I
you feel
think
like doing it, do it.
yeah, we would really appreciate it. All right, and we'll see you next Monday for a new episode.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.